There was a moment in Earth's long and violent history when survival itself hung by a single fragile thread. A time so dark, so catastrophic, that nearly every living thing on the planet stood at the edge of total annihilation. Oceans boiled with death, skies were choked with poison, and the land burned beneath collapsing ecosystems. This was not a movie scene or a myth. This was real. Scientists now call it Earth's darkest hour, a period when survival became almost impossible. To understand how close life came to vanishing forever, we must travel back more than 250 million years to the end of the Permian period. At that time, Earth looked very different. All the continents were bound together into one massive supercontinent known as Pangaea. Vast deserts stretched across the interior, while shallow seas hugged the edges. Life had thrived for millions of years. Giant insects filled the skies, massive amphibians ruled the swamps, and early reptiles were beginning to dominate the land. It was an age of growth. Then, without warning, everything began to die. What followed was the largest mass extinction event in Earth's history, far worse than the one that killed the dinosaurs. Scientists estimate that over 90% of marine life and nearly 70% of land species vanished. Entire families of creatures were wiped out forever. Forests collapsed, coral reefs disappeared. The world entered an age of death so extreme that paleontologists once called it the Great Dying. But what could possibly cause such total destruction? The answer lies deep beneath the crust of what is now Siberia. Around this time, the Earth's interior grew violently unstable. Gigantic volcanic eruptions, far larger than any human has ever witnessed, began to rip open the land. These weren't ordinary volcanoes. They were super eruptions that continued not for days or years, but for hundreds of thousands of years. Rivers of lava flooded across continents. The land cracked open, releasing unimaginable volumes of toxic gases into the sky. Among these gases were carbon dioxide, methane, and sulfur dioxide, deadly chemicals capable of reshaping the entire planet. As these gases spread through the atmosphere, global temperatures began to rise uncontrollably. Earth entered a phase of extreme runaway climate change. The oceans warmed, ice vanished. The planet became hotter than at almost any other time in its history. As temperatures soared, the oceans began to lose their oxygen. This created vast dead zones where fish and marine creatures could no longer breathe. Entire underwater ecosystems suffocated in darkness. At the same time, sulfur gases mixed with rain, creating acid storms that burned plant life from the land. Forests withered. Food chains collapsed. With plants dying, herbivores soon followed, and behind them, the great predators. But the nightmare didn't end there. Deep within the oceans, deadly microorganisms began producing hydrogen sulfide gas, a poisonous compound that smells like rotten eggs and is lethal even in small concentrations. This toxic gas rose from the seas into the atmosphere, poisoning the air. The protective ozone layer weakened, allowing deadly ultraviolet radiation from the sun to strike Earth's surface directly. Life was being attacked from every direction: land, sea, and sky. Imagine a world where the air itself can kill you, where the sun burns your skin, where no food grows, where the oceans are silent graveyards. This was Earth during its darkest hour. Creatures that had ruled the planet for millions of years vanished in geological instants. Giant amphibians disappeared. Trilobites, which had survived for over 270 million years, were erased forever. Entire forests collapsed into dust. The planet did not simply change, it nearly reset itself. For tens of thousands of years, survival was almost impossible, but life, against all logic and odds, did not completely vanish. Hidden in underground burrows, in the deepest ocean trenches, and in the most extreme corners of the world, tiny and resilient survivors endured. Small reptile-like creatures with low oxygen needs crawled through the ashes. Simple marine organisms clung to hydrothermal vents where heat still provided energy. These few survivors would become the ancestors of nearly all modern life on Earth, including us. But this fragile survival came at a terrible cost. Earth remained a hostile world for millions of years after the extinction. Recovery was slow and painful. Ecosystems had to rebuild from ruins. New species evolved to fill the empty niches left behind by the dead. Slowly, very slowly, the planet began to breathe again. Yet the shadow of Earth's darkest hour never truly disappeared, because this event proved something terrifying. Life on this planet is not invincible. It showed that even Earth itself can turn into a near-death trap, that survival is never guaranteed, and that extinction does not arrive with a warning, it arrives suddenly, violently, and without mercy. In the next part, we will explore how life finally recovered, what creatures rose from the ashes of this global catastrophe, and why scientists believe similar extinction-level threats could one day return, not from volcanoes, but from ourselves. When the fires of destruction finally slowed and the poisonous skies began to clear, Earth stood silent, its surface scarred, its oceans emptied, its ecosystems shattered. The world that emerged after the Great Dying was not the thriving planet that had existed before. It was a broken wasteland. Vast stretches of land were bare and lifeless. The seas were nearly empty. Food chains had been erased. For the few survivors that remained, the struggle was far from over. Survival was now a daily battle against a planet that still felt hostile and unstable. For nearly 5 million years, life on Earth struggled to recover. This was one of the slowest biological recoveries ever recorded. The reason was simple. The disasters did not end all at once. Temperatures remained dangerously high. Oxygen levels in the oceans stayed low. Toxic gases still seeped from the depths. Earth was alive, but barely breathing. But evolution never stops. In the ruins, a new generation of life began to rise. Small, hardy creatures that required less oxygen and less food slowly spread across the land. These early survivors included primitive reptiles that could survive in dry, oxygen-poor environments. Unlike the massive creatures that once dominated the world, these animals were small, fast, and adaptable. In a world where everything had collapsed, adaptability became the ultimate weapon. In the oceans, simple organisms such as bacteria, algae, and small invertebrates were the first to rebuild the marine ecosystem. Over time, these tiny forms of life stabilized the food web. Fish slowly returned. Coral reefs, once wiped out, began forming again from scratch. It would take tens of millions of years for the oceans to regain anything close to their former diversity. On land, strange new life forms appeared. Massive amphibians vanished forever, replaced by more advanced reptiles. Among them were the earliest ancestors of dinosaurs. These creatures would later rise to dominate the planet for over 160 million years, but their reign began in the ashes of Earth's darkest hour. What makes this recovery so haunting is that it was not a triumphant rebirth. It was slow, painful, and filled with repeated collapses. Many species that evolved during this period vanished before they could establish themselves. Nature experimented endlessly, testing forms of life in a wounded world. But eventually, stability returned. Forests slowly reclaimed the land. Insects multiplied. Predators and prey rebuilt their ancient balance. Earth, against all expectations, healed itself. Yet the Great Dying left behind a terrifying lesson, one that modern science now understands more clearly than ever before. The disaster was not caused by a single explosion. It was caused by unchecked climate change, driven by massive carbon emissions from volcanic activity. As greenhouse gases flooded the atmosphere, global warming spiraled out of control. Oceans lost oxygen, acid rain fell, food webs collapsed. Every major life-supporting system failed in sequence. This is why scientists today view the end Permian extinction as a powerful warning. For the first time in Earth's history, another species, humankind, is now releasing massive amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. Factory smoke, vehicle exhaust, deforestation, industrial emissions, together they are rapidly altering Earth's climate. Temperatures are rising, ice is melting, ocean oxygen levels are declining, coral reefs are bleaching, species are disappearing at alarming rates.